Alright, in our last tutorial we created a high poly model of a shield. Now what we need to do is we're going to go through and we're going to create a low poly version. And we're going to take all this high poly detail and we're going to bake it into the low poly version of the model. Okay, so what we need to do now is we're going to create a simple low poly version. For ease of getting this concept across, we're only dealing with just the front. We're not dealing with the back side at all. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead here, and in the front, I need to create a simplified version of this. So I'm going to hide everything else. Hide unselected. Okay, so here is my basic model. I'm going to take all these pieces. I'm going to select all of them, and up here at the top, I'm going to call it HP and hit enter. This is my name selection set, so anytime I want to grab all the high poly pieces, I can click up there and select them. So I'm going to take the backing here. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to call it shield underscore LP and say OK, because I want to make a low poly version of it. And I'm just going to say hide unselected. Okay, so now I want to make a simplified version of this model. So what I'm going to do here in this case is let's think about what's the best way to do this. I think if I come into the front, I'm going to optimize this down to simplify it. In edge mode, I'm just going to grab all these edges here and do loop, remove loop, loop, remove loop. I'm going to make a very simple version for purposes of what we're doing. Loop, remove loop. I'm going to make this basically flat. Very, very flat. Now that doesn't mean that all low to high poly baking has to be perfectly flat. Not by any means is that true. Loops, remove loop. Alright, so here I have a very basic flat shape. All right, it has a little bit of form to it. Let's go into edge. All right, I can probably do loop flow connect to kind of round it out a little bit. Loop flow connect. Loop flow connect. All right, now I have a slightly round shield. I'm going to go ahead and put a material on this. So we'll open up our material editor. I'm going to put a standard material, assign it, double click, let's give it a name. I'm going to call it shield. And close it. So let's unhide all. Let's take a look at everything else. Alright, there's all our other geo now. I didn't put any curve at all on the high poly shield. So let's go ahead and I'm going to select all of it. I'm going to do group. I'm going to group it together. And in this group, I'm going to put an FFD 4x4x4. If I grab the control points in the center, I should be able to take those and just pull them out like that. So now it's got a little bit of a curve to it. All right, a little bit of curve, a little bit of form, just like an actual shield does. All right, not too much, but just enough. We'll just say top level. All right, let's select our high poly and hide that. All right, so your low poly shield is going to need UVs because you're going to need to know where you're going to bake all your detail to. So let's zoom in here. I would say that this is too many edges. So I'm going to grab this edge out here on the end. I'm going to do modify selection and grab dot ring. And then I'm going to ring select. Now dot ring under modify selection grabs every other edge. If I hit collapse, I've just simplified down my shield. So now if I go into element and click, you see it's only 321 polys, which is really nice and low poly for something like this. If I zoom in, they do all come to a point here. Let's just come and grab all those and collapse that. And we got to collapse it a couple times to make sure it gets down to 1 point. Yep, vertex number 2. Make sure that is zeroed out in the world. Oops. A little bit too far there. Let's take him back. There we go. Perfect. All right, there is our basic low poly shield. So this guy's going to need UVs. Y, fit. There we go. If you remember where the handle is, hide unselected, where the handle is, that represents the top of our UVs. So let's go ahead and we'll rotate this 180 degrees so it's pointing up. All right, so then if we convert to edit poly, we'll put a unwrap UVW on, open the UV editor. Now let's shrink this in a little bit so it doesn't go right to the edge. There we go. I'm going to convert to edit poly. So there's our shield low poly. We'll just type in LP. All right, now I'm going to take this mesh. I'm going to do File. I have a folder here. I'm going to copy that path and say File, Export Selected. I'm going to paste my path and I'm going to do shield underscore LP, and I'm going to save as an FBX file. Save. Okay. So I'm going to hide that, or I'm going to unhide all, and then I'm going to select my high poly. So this high poly happens to be grouped. Your high poly does not have to be grouped though. That's not important. File, export selected. This will be shield underscore HP. Save. Okay. So now I'm going to take my shield and I'm going to bring it into Substance Painter. And so I'm going to pause here and get that loaded up. Here I am in Substance Painter. So I'm going to go ahead and do File, New. Currently I'm set to use Unreal Engine 4. I'm going to come over to File, Select, and I'm going to go to where my shield's at. I'm going to select my low poly and say Open. 2048, okay. Alright, here's my shield mesh. Here's my shield UV layout. I now need to go through and bake my maps. So I'm going to do Bake Mesh Maps. This is a square texture. I'm going to come through and select my shield high poly. Open that. I'm going to change my max frontal distance to 0.1 and the max rear and just say Bake. Now this is going to go through and it's going to take all that high poly detail and it's going to render out a series of maps with it. You can see it's already going relatively quick. The goal with high poly to low poly baking is you want to make sure that you don't see the polygons in your high poly mesh. You want to be able to get a nice clean bake, similar to what I'm getting here, where you don't see the polygons. You're just seeing all that beautiful detail rendered out into your textures. So right now it's finishing up the last of the maps, and then once that's finished, we can use these materials to finish off our shield. So I'm going to come over here and add a new folder. And I'm just going to drag over brass old. And the software is going to go process that. And now I have an old brass shield. All right. So what I can do is if I save my file, go to this location, hit, oops, I just need to give it, I was already in the right folder. I just need to type in the name and hit save. Now you do File, Export Textures. Just, again, I specify that location. Render them out in the way I want. I want Unreal Engine 4. I'm going to hit Export. So that's going to go ahead and it's going to create a series of textures for me that I can bring into my software. You're always going to get more and you should just click OK. Now, if you didn't want to have just one material here, there's another way you could do this. I'm back in Max. I'm going to hide unselected. I'm going to do Group Open. I'm going to open up my material editor and I'm going to make a brand new material here. I'm going to make this red. And then I'm going to make another one and I'm going to make this green. Alright, so I'm going to grab everything here. I'm going to assign it all this green color. And then I'm just going to grab the back. I'm going to make that red. Alright, and now let's go and say Group Close. I'm going to take this guy and do File, Export Selected, and I'm going to call it Shield HP 2, save. Okay. Yep, fine with that. Okay, now if I come back to Substance Painter, I'm going to go to Bake Mesh Maps, and I'm going to select my shield. Actually, first I'm going to select this existing one and remove it. Come into New Page, do HP2, Open. And now, because I assigned different materials, I'm going to go to ID. I'm going to change it from Vertex Color to Material Color. And now I'm going to click Bake Shield Mesh Maps. And so that's going to go through and that's going to bake out an ID mask. All right, and so what it's doing is it's going through and it's rendering out these different maps based on the surface of that high poly geometry. All right, so it's taken its time. It's a complex model. And over here under texture set settings, all those maps show up down here that are rendered out. And so if we scroll down, as soon as thickness is done, we'll be able to see what they look like. All right, it's almost finished there. There we go. So if we scroll down, we can see here's our normal, world space normal ID. So if I go to this folder and say add mask with color selection, I can say I want all that part to be brass. And see now I can make a new folder and I can add a different material in there. So if I wanted to say put copper and have this shield be a mix, that's in there now. It's going to take the software a moment to kind of process and render that out, because it's a complicated material that it has to generate here. See, it's going through and it's processing it. It's going to render it right out on top. And then as soon as that's finished, we'll be able to go through, right click, add mask with color selection, and we say we just want the copper on that outer edge. And so now we have a shield that is a mix of those two different materials. And so if you go through, you can add different material types, right? And so it's assigning materials to your high poly allows you to bake out an ID mask, which makes creating more complex materials, more visually exciting materials, that much easier. So that's the process of high poly and low poly modeling, and then using Substance Painter to bake out that detail.